Thank you to Church in Ocean Park Choir. That's right. Right. I'm Reverend Janet Gollery McKithen. I'm the minister here at the Church in Ocean Park, and I'm here to welcome you to the Church in Ocean Park. You're welcome. Because we have the name Church in our title, you may wonder if you're actually welcome here. You're welcome if you're here, if you're, we're multi-faith, so you are welcome if you're Jewish, if you're Buddhist, if you're Wiccan, if you're Christian, but not, if you're spiritual but not religious, if you're Hindu, if you're Buddhist, if you're some combination or something else I haven't mentioned or something I have never heard about. You're welcome here at the Church in Ocean Park. If you're atheist, if you're agnostic, if you're humanist, whatever it is. Muslim. If you're Muslim. And if you're Sikh, you're welcome here. You're welcome if you're single, married, divorced, gay, transgender, very rich, or living on the edge. We welcome you if you're fidgety or if you're very focused. We welcome you if you're right now standing up to go get something to eat or if you're actually sitting down. You're welcome, it doesn't matter. We welcome soccer moms, tree huggers, latte sippers, vegans, junk food eaters. We welcome those who like organized religion and those who are repelled by it. We especially welcome you if you're standing in the need of prayer or if you're here sort of hesitantly because you've been hurt by religion. We hope you'll find this a place of healing. This is a unique multi-religious community that's focused on trying to create a more equitable and sustainable world. We want to begin by acknowledging that we're currently sitting on stolen land. In Santa Monica, where we sit, the land was taken violently from the Chumash, the Quiche, and the Tongva peoples. We acknowledge the harms of genocide, forced assimilation, enslavement, and destruction at the hands of U.S. settler colonialism. We acknowledge also that our communities and country was built on the backs of people stolen from Africa, placed into bondage, and forced into labor. We acknowledge that we benefit from that labor that has never been repaid. In our acknowledgement, let us commit ourselves to healing by helping to create a more just and equitable community and world through the struggle of changing how we do things that we see as normal, but are actually hurting people. We all have biases, no matter who we are, and it takes intentionality to be able to step out of those biases, those places. So we seek at Church in Ocean Park to work together across boundaries and bring people in who work together, who maybe not agree on everything, so that we can grow in our knowledge of what's happening in the world and be better and more efficient activists and change makers. If you hear something you disagree with, know that that person does not speak entirely for the Church in Ocean Park, and your voice is just as important. Thank you for being a part of this community this morning and helping to break the barriers and build more compassion. Thank you for being a part of bending the arc towards justice over and over and over again. We center ourselves each week with a chant by Thich Nhat Hanh. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now, 3 times. So Louise already told you that we have a wonderful Doña Dirlam here this morning, and many of you remember her from being here back in the day. But Doña to me is in the walls, as she's in the new ceiling as well as the old ceiling. She's a part of the church in Ocean Park. She helped create what this church is. She's the sort of a mother of the church, and I'm so glad that you're back. Thank you. Welcome, Doña.
It's wonderful to be here and be in the space again. I was here in December. The Women's Spirituality Group met in person, so I got to experience it then, but it's never often enough. So thank you for being here in person. Appreciate it. I know there's a lot going on today with Chuck's celebration of life, so it will be quite a day. I'm going to start with us. Nate is going to play a video for us so that you're going to get to experience firsthand Sweet Honey in the Rock. How many of you have been to a concert and seen them in person? Oh, fabulous. All right.
We have traveled a long way this evening to be here, and we are grateful that we are able to sing these songs, voicing how we feel about the things that we see in life. And we think that it's very important to maintain freedom. So we say, we who believe in freedom, we cannot rest. We cannot be complacent. We may stay alert, stay active, and stay involved. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest.
Oh, how can you rest?
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mother sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons. Sing with us. We who believe in freedom cannot rest.
Oh, how can you rest?
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The older I get, the better I know that the secret to my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young dead to run against the storm. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing for the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. But now we who believe in freedom cannot rest.
Don't you
We
rest?
who believe in freedom cannot rest. You know that struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand
So I picked Sweet Honey in the Rock to celebrate Beltane because Beltane's the beginning of summer. It's one of the earliest words used in the early Irish literature. It also is known as Cat Samhain, which isn't even close to how if we only had Carolyn Rosenberg here, early member of the church, she knows how to speak some Celtic words. She'd be able to say it properly. It's when the cattle were taken back into the pasture, and they would set up bonfires, and the cattle and the people would go through the bonfires as a way to purify and also protect the cattle, protect agriculture, and promote life and growth. So I thought, what better to choose for our Sweet Honey, for our moment of the beginning of summer than this group, Sweet Honey in the Rock. We'll start with the slides. This a cappella singing group is thrilling and remarkable and has existed for 51 years. In this slide, we see in the lower left-hand corner the founder. Lower left-hand corner, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan. And behind her, Aisha Kahil. Aisha Kahil is still a member of the group today. They're still performing today, which we'll talk about at the very end. So she's been with the group for 50 of the 51 years. In the middle is Shirley Childers Johnson. Very early on, the group was started with 4 people. Very early on, they added an interpreter. So it was probably the first time I ever saw going to a concert, going to a performance, and having somebody do interpretation for the hearing impaired. Behind her is Evelyn Mao Harris. To the right, Issei Barnwell, and many of us did workshops singing with her. And then in the lower right-hand corner, Nitanche Bolade. The group was founded in 1973 by Dr. Bernice Reagan. At that point in time, she was the artistic director at the all-black repertory company in Washington, D.C. She was helping them develop their voices, develop their songs, bringing them songs to sing, and some of the members said, you really need to start a group. You really need to perform these songs publicly. And she followed that great advice, and in 1973, the group came together. It was Bernice Johnson Reagan, Louise Robinson, Carol Mylard, who's still active today, and Mie. Their first performance was at Howard University, November 23rd, 1973. They came upon the name Sweet Honey from this very first song that they practiced called Sweet Honey in the Rock. It was actually Honey in the Rock, and it was written by blind Mamie Forchard in 1927. It refers to a psalm, Psalm 81:16, that says, honey will flow from the rocks. Then many other members were added to the group. Bernice was also a founding member of Students for Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She was a member of the Freedom Singers, and she got her PhD from Howard in Cultural History. Her mentor was Ella Josephine Baker. Ella, next. So here's the first album that they did in 1973. Next, please. I first saw Sweet Honey in the Rock in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm going to say that it was in the late 70s. Loved them. And then when I came here to Santa Monica and the church in Ocean Park, I discovered you all also loving Sweet Honey in the Rock. Eleanor Graham, Louise Dobbs, Franci, and a group of us, every time they came to town, we would go to see the concert. So see, these are some of our favorite albums. I always thought Ella's song must refer to a mother or a grandmother who'd lost a son to gun violence. And maybe Eleanor told us where the song came from, or maybe Louise told us from where the song came from, but I forgot. It was only in doing for this, that Ella's song refers to Ella Josephine Baker. She was just the most amazing woman. We mostly haven't heard that. Some of you, you indicated right away that you knew who she was, but she grew up in North Carolina. Her grandmother was an enslaved person, and it was her stories that really had a great influence on her life and focused her on civil rights from the time she was very young all the way to the end of her life. This documentary was created by Joanne Grant in 1981 to tell the story of Ella Baker. And fundi is a Swahili word that means teacher, or one who communicates, one who passes on ideas, and that was a nickname she had. It turns out that one of the things that she did was she joined Martin Luther King and was a member of NAACP. When they separated from NAACP and started the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, she was there. She was active then and often clashed with the male leaders, Martin Luther King and the other male leaders, because she felt that it shouldn't be a hierarchy of charismatic leaders. It should really be a community effort and people coming together and working together. So then she went off and helped found Students for a Nonviolent Society. It was while she was a member of that she realized when the three civil rights members were murdered, that it wasn't until people started searching for them, because two were white, that they found all these other black men who had been killed and dumped into Mississippi rivers. And so she was outraged that that's what it took. She was outraged that it happened, but she was also outraged that it took. So that's where the song comes from, Ella's song. Next. I was able to, 2 weeks ago, to go with our church, with the church that I go to quite often now, United Church of Christ in Carlsbad, led by Madison Shockley, who used to be here in LA and knows Janet and knows Jim. And we have an anti-racism reading group, and that group last year went to Montgomery and spent a week in Montgomery. The follow-up to that was a trip this year to Washington, D.C. We started out on Capitol Hill with a United Church of Christ lobbyist, and she trained us in doing some basic lobby work. We were in the Methodist building on Capitol Hill, and then we went over to the Capitol offices and met with the two Senate aides of the two state Senate, our two California senators, Senator Butler and Senator Padilla. And that was the day that the Prime Minister of Japan came, so they were having a joint session of Congress, so we didn't actually get to see the senators. We might not have anyway, it might have been the aides. But what was cool about our training to do lobbying is that we started with mass incarceration, then we also talked about border issues, we talked about migrants, and we could relate that to things that were happening in our church. We have a fellow in our church community who's in prison for 3 strikes on a burglary charge and trying to help get his sentence reduced. We've taken families in and have them, helping them try to get asylum through that process. And what was remarkable when we talked to the aides was how pleased they were, how rejuvenated they were that here we were talking about what was happening on the ground locally, where they're in the doing the work at the legal level. So it was really reinforcing to be there and to do that talking. At the end of the week, we went to the National Museum of African American History. If you haven't been, please make a point of going. And in 2 years, the church will again do this same trip and go back to Washington. So I'm walking through the levels. There's 5 levels, and I've gotten to the 3rd level, and I hear a voice saying, until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of white men's sons, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. And it was Ella Baker. They had, in the recorded section, her voice was coming out. And the image that we saw, could we go back one slide? This is, the image on the right is where she's giving that speech, and she's giving it to a group that was formed in Mississippi, the Black Mississippi Democratic Party, because at that point in time, the Democratic Party was still holding on to segregationist ideas. So she had formed that, and she's giving that speech, and that's where the words for the song come from. Next. So over the 51 years, 24 women have been part of Sweet Honey in the Rock, and you can go onto YouTube and see lots of the videos that show the different members doing different songs. Next. There are 2 children's albums, and Ishe Oluwa comes from the one on the left, All for Freedom, and the one on the right, All God's Children Got Shoes, is another great song. So I recommend those for yourself and for your kids and grandkids. Next. There are 2 documentaries. You can see them on PBS. Next. This is Sweet Honey in the Rock today. And on the Love and Evolution very timely album that came out, it goes on to talk about police brutality and names. It also gives the children who've been killed in gun violence at schools. Next. And finally, Sweet Honey in the Rock is coming back to LA, so we might have to organize a trip. They'll be on December 19th and December 20th. It says December 20th at 4:30 a.m. I don't think so. I think it's probably 4:30 p.m. So maybe some of us will want to go do that. And this is the flyer from the last, not the last concert, because I know we also saw Sweet Honey in the Rock at one of their farewell concerts in Malibu. But this was the flyer from when we went to see them at the Wilshire Evil Theater. And I know there was a large group of us who went. You're nodding your heads. You were there, yes. All right. So here we are. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Got to keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you. About to start community sharing, but I want to tell you what happened when I first got here 19 years ago. I get here in July. The first thing I do is go camping on the beach in Malibu with a bunch of women. The next thing I did was go to Sweet Honey in the Rock with a whole bunch of great people. The next thing I did was go camping at Catalina, and I'm like, where did I land? And it kept happening, and it keeps happening. This is like, oh my gosh, you can't believe from where I came from. I mean, I could tell you stories. It's a little different. So thank you, Doña. And Doña was a part of all of those things that I just mentioned. So yeah, this is an amazing place to be. We like to have, these people not only are wonderful musicians, but their messages and their experiences. I mean, that's why it's so deep, and their harmonies and stuff. But I didn't know there had been so many going through there for this whole time. So thank you so much, Doña, for this. And now you all get a chance. I had to say that because I just couldn't keep it in. But now you all have a chance to say something or ask a question. Craig.
My goodness, my goodness, my goodness. First and foremost, it's good to see you. When you talk about Ella Baker and you mention her speech to the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, oh my God. That is a story that needs to be told, and that's one of the stories I want to tell. my mother wrote a book about that called Mississippi Challenge. The interesting thing about the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party under the direction of Lawrence Guyot and Fannie Lou Hamer, they registered somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 people to vote, which meant roughly 3 delegates. Mississippi had a total of 5. And they called for 3. Oh, there was a serious fight because now Senators Stennis and Eastland had a problem. I could talk just based on, the opening, because for what that's worth, I'm not going to say the women's movement started, but it took a huge step after that with the spirit of Ella Baker, Diane Nash, Fannie Lou Hamer, and others within that. So I'm beaming at the idea that you more or less brought this up. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would love to read a copy of the book. Thank you. Yes, I'd love to read a copy of the book. I truly did not know nearly as much about these women until I started working on this, because, as I said, I always thought Ella's song was a mother, a grandmother. I didn't realize it was Ella Josephine Baker. And then to read about what she did, and Diane Nash and all of them, Fannie Lou Hamer, it's so important that we tell that story too. So I'm so glad you're doing that. Thank you. Oh,
Yes, thanks for your wonderful talk on Sweet Honey in the Rock. I went on a couple of those concert excursions in the 80s, mid-80s, and I remember people may not know that your musical tastes go all over the map, and Jamaican music and African music, and you started a drumming group here, and well, I remember our excursion all the way down to Orange County to see Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry with a bunch of famous people backing them up. And Chuck Berry, after 2 songs, walked off the stage and wouldn't come back. And we made this trip to see him, and we were like, what? But I just remember, these celebrations of the changing the seasons, Doña used to run them on the beach. We used to be on the beach in a circle in the early sunset. They were amazing years, and it brings back a lot of memories, so thank you.
and I found here at the church, I got a wonderful photograph here at the church, I got a wonderful photograph of that cluster of palm trees that's at the end of Ocean Park Boulevard where we gather. So I have that hanging in my kitchen to remind me of all those wonderful times with Susan and Jim and Louise and Elizabeth and Ellen. Francis, yep.
Because I had no background before coming here about this musical group, when I heard the name Ella Josephine Baker, my mind went to the Josephine Baker who would entertain in France, the dancer and things like that. So I got confused. So is Ella Josephine Baker, I guess, named after Josephine Baker? Is that just a... Oh, okay.
The parents, the Bakers, named her, I'm guessing, yes.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
she would go by Ella Jo, too.
I see, because it took me a few minutes from...
I didn't say as much as I could have about her. Her parents sent her and her 2 sorry.
It's okay. Can I? It's okay. We can hear you. Can I use this one?
Her parents sent her and her 2 siblings to a Baptist private school in the early 1900s. You realize how few kids were able to go to school at that age. At that time period, black kids, it just wasn't available. And she not only finished that, went to college, and was valedictorian of her class. So that was, again, with all that she did, amazing.
Thank you,
Yes.
Doña, for coming. It's so good to see you, all the
you.
camping trips and all the time together.
Yeah.
I went to see Culture Clash last night. So then going to that experience and then coming here today, it's just amazing because they did a whole history of like Chicano history in LA, California, and they celebrated 40 years of being together. And it was really neat to be in a room that everybody is like such a fan of this group, and like it was great.
Super. And the only reason I wasn't at Joshua Tree is I had the Washington, D.C. trip coming up. Otherwise, I'd have been there.
Well, I think we cannot highlight enough how much this woman is a pillar of this church. And I mean, Janet phrased it just right when she called her, in Black church tradition, a mother of the church, right? So it's just so wonderful to have you here. And the story about Ella Baker is, Ella's song is one that I did not know. I assumed that it was based on a woman who had lost her son. So thank you for bringing
You're so
that.
welcome. Yeah.
And I do have a question.
Yeah.
I would like to know, because the Irish just seem to be on top of social dissent and, political movement. I mean, you look at them today even, they're standing up in Ireland's parliament saying ceasefire.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know more about Beltran. Is it
Beltane? Uh-huh.
Beltane.
Beltane.
Yeah.
Beltane.
If you could just share just a little bit more about that history.
All of these cross dates are so important. Between summer solstice and fall equinox, we have Lammas. Between fall equinox and winter solstice, we have All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day. In January, between winter solstice and spring equinox, we have St. Bridget's Day, or I've forgotten Imbolc. Thank you. Yeah, because that was always Ethel's holiday that she did, because around her birthday, and then Beltane. So they're really important times to mark whatever's happening in nature, and I think because they're so connected to the earth, that's part of and the responsibility for the earth. It's like the Native American traditions or African traditions where you're connected to the earth, and I think that's part of why they speak up against power, because in every case you see people saying, no, the tyranny is wrong. We have to be connected to the earth. We have to take care of our people. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Great to see you again, Doña, of course. And I wanted to skip back to Ella Baker. I'm glad you emphasized her. There's a great, if you want to learn more about Ella Baker, there's a great biography of hers by Barbara Ransby, who herself is quite an activist and scholar. By the way, Ella Baker also was a great reader. She was just always reading when she wasn't, in action. But she has really become, you can correct me if this seems wrong, Trudy. She's sort of like the patron saint for people nowadays organizing who emphasize sort of horizontal.
Exactly, yeah.
Organizing as opposed to vertical.
Yeah.
Who are in favor of a leader-full movement, not leader-less, but many people leading. Ella Baker is sort of the star now, in some ways beyond Martin Luther King, among many.
And you hear it in,
Activists.
so Dr. Reagan wrote the song wrote the rest of the words that are in Ella's song. And now that I listen to it more often, it speaks to that too. Her being that kind of calling for that kind of work, community work together, leaders rising up as opposed to the top down.
Yeah.
And you remember in the 60s and 70s, black women didn't get the respect in those civil rights organizations. And she was part of calling for that respect. Yeah.
So, yeah, amazing person.
But that biography is on Amazon. And we look at Amazon, then we go buy it other places. We find it on Amazon, then we go somewhere else and buy it. Independent bookstore and buy it. But yeah, it looks really good. And you can find Fundi, the documentary, too, and it's got her speaking. So that's cool. Yes?
Thank you. I always enjoy hearing from you, Doña. But this is off topic. Janet, I wondered if you would be able to make some remarks about the United Methodist Church gathering.
I'd be happy to. After decades and decades of actively working behind the scenes and trying to make it happen, finally, the United Methodist Church made a lot of rulings at the General Conference these last 2 weeks that are important. One is that now all the weddings that I've been doing for people of the same gender, they're actually legal for me to have done. Yes. And secondly, they finally decided that gay people can be ordained, which is great. And they've decided that they took the ridiculous language out of the Book of Discipline, which I don't even it's hard for me to even say what it said, but I will say it because it's out now. Homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching when actually it was the United Methodist Church that was incompatible with Christian teaching. But now that's gone. And then the good thing also is we have been always colonizing and racist and all those other things. Some of that is possible to take to get rid of. They voted at the General Conference to be for regionalization, which means that not only is Africa, the continent of Africa and the Philippines and Europe central conferences, but the United States is. It used to be that it was very U.S.-centric, and everybody else was they'd come to the General Conference, they'd talk a lot about what happens in the United States. It would be in English and blah, 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 now but we have to vote on it again at our annual conferences. So that's it's not quite done, but that is a really good thing also. And there's things that happened with people with disabilities, and there's things that happened in other areas as well. We reconfirmed working against racism and some other things like that. So those are, the big news that you'll hear is about LGBTQ folks, which is important. And then there's other things that are important as well. So finally, it's kind of bittersweet because really, really celebrate, and also realize how much pain and trauma there was for no reason. On the people who are gone now because of what we've done in the past 20 years, people that took their own life, the people whose parents shoved them out the door, this is not okay. So it's kind of anyway, it's celebrate with a kind of a bittersweet. Thank you.
I was just happy to hear that you wouldn't be going to jail. That was my
Yeah, no more jail time or threat. Yeah. Okay. Give that one.
And a special thank you to Nate for taking on both those video and...
Yes, thank you to Nate.
I wanted to add to Doña being in the fabric of the church, because she led the women's spirituality for so long, was a big part of women's spirituality, and still is now that we've kind of brought it back after the pandemic. And I just wanted to say that during the pandemic, I've missed her so much since she left. And I went down to visit her in Carlsbad, and it was a long way to get there. And we talked about, there's her women's group is down there. And so we did a Zoom during the pandemic, and I joined her women's group. Had never met any of them for the entire year and a half or so. And then after that kind of calmed down, I started driving down there every 2 weeks. And I'll tell you, that trip is not easy. It takes hours, and she did it every weekend for years, for 17 years.
But I got to be with you guys.
I know,
And
I
lived with
know.
Elizabeth Keller.
But I wanted to say, you know, that your part of women's spirituality is really important to me because you bring an Earth Mother energy to it, and I really love it. Thanks.
Yes, I think that, you know, a lot of places have the people that they respect, that they just like a part of our gut, sort of, and that's, I feel like that's who you are. Like I really, really, really respect you, and you're kind of, you helped create this place. I mean, usually you hear about the people that created this space, but Doña is one of them. And so if it weren't for Doña, you know, some people who don't stand up and take the credit, all that are actually doing all the work. Yeah, and so thank you so much, and we so appreciate you being here.
It's all because of you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's give her. We got one more.
Yes.
Yeah,
Go, Jerry.
I was just wondering if you're involved in doing those wonderful gem shows.
I had a great, he asked about the gem shows. Yes, I was a gemologist and worked 37 years at the Gemological Institute. And this spring at the Tucson show, I did an exhibit on pegmatites. Pegmatites are the kinds of rocks that grow really big crystals, and you can get cool gems from it, and that's what's in San Diego County. So yeah, still working on that too. It's just fun.
Louise.
I'll just speak in here. Okay. I just wanted to talk about Doña for a minute, too. There were a time, what was it, in the 80s or 90s, when we went, a lot of us, including Doña, me, Susan, and other people, went to Women's Alliance Camp near Nevada City, California, and we had workshops and got into drumming and chanting and singing. And that's where I found my maker, in drumming, dancing, and singing. And it was so fabulous. And we had a good time. And then the other thing, me and Doña used to go to a lot of African music concerts because that was my jam so much, and hers too. Although Doña was really into reggae also, and I love that too. And those are great memories, doing those concerts together.
Fabulous concert. Yep. She took me to see Fela Kuti. I was thinking of Fela Kuti.
All right. Well, we thank you so much, Doña.
Thank you. Thank you all.